You're listening to C-Suite Unplugged, a podcast by the Business Council of Alberta, where the province's top executives share their career story, what's happening at their companies, and speak candidly about the most pressing business issues. I'm your host, Adam Legge, and in each episode, I sit down with Alberta's leading CEOs, entrepreneurs, and industry leaders to explore their path to the top and what they're focused on right now. Enjoy the show. Today's guest leads a company that helps keep the lights on, literally, for more than 500,000 Albertans. With nearly 30 years of experience in the utility sector, she's built her career across a family of national companies, developing deep expertise in the business of delivering safe, reliable, and affordable electricity to homes, businesses, and communities across the country. She's a recipient of the King Charles III Coronation Medal, recognizing her leadership and support of women and youth pursuing careers in the skilled trades. In this episode of C-Suite Unplugged, I'm joined by Janine Sullivan, President and Chief Executive Officer of FortisAlberta. Follow along as we discuss her journey from Newfoundland to Alberta, the importance of building the next generation of skilled trades workers, and how Alberta's electricity industry is evolving to meet the needs of a rapidly growing province. Well, Janine, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's start with you and your early life and your career, and then we'll get into the business and the big picture. But so tell us, what was your early life like? And everybody likes to hear about the first job. So what was the first job you had that paid a paycheck?
It's interesting, Adam. I don't think anyone grows up in their early days thinking, I'm going to pursue a commerce degree and do a CA and maybe move into a financial role as their long-term career path. But I think growing up in an island like Newfoundland, where there are limited opportunities. I think financial security is often top of mind. My family, we were a single income family. My mom stayed home and cared for us. And it was all about making choices early on about a clear path forward, right? Everything was very conservative. We had things well planned out. And so it wasn't really aspirational or visionary. It was really about security and sure footing. Right? So, going to Memorial and finding a commerce degree and then articling with Grant Thornton and getting my CA was a fairly stable path forward. Yeah. My first role outside of public practice was actually with a joint venture that did the HVAC systems for the Hibernia platform. So that was very interesting early in my career. I think it gave me a little bit of insight into industry, just enough that Newfoundland Power reached out to me and said, we'd like to bring you on and start a career here. And again, in Newfoundland, Fortis, Newfoundland Power, one of the best employers in the province. And when you're looking to the future, a great place to get started and see a longer term career path. Yeah. And so I was there until Fortis decided to acquire the Aquila assets in Alberta in 2004. And my husband and I came out in 2006. The kids were 2 and 4. Just a perfect time before they started school, and a new path opened up here in Alberta.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Did you always intend to leave Newfoundland, or did you think you were going to stay? Because, in Alberta, you can throw a rock and you'll either hit a Newfoundlander or a Saskatchewan person. Yeah. Was that something, or had that been in the plan, or what was your...
It really wasn't, because both John and I, my husband, we had established ourselves very well in the province. And other than going outward looking for work, Newfoundlanders tend to stay very close to home.
Right.
They're steadfast in the belief that Newfoundland and Labrador is God's country and the only place in the world to be.
Yes.
And we believed that, but I think looking to the future, and we knew that our boys would probably venture outside of Newfoundland. And we come from small families, and so there was a better draw, I think, for us to move outside of Newfoundland, and this was the perfect way to do that. Yeah. We really haven't looked back, and it'll be 20 years this month, actually, since we left.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so Alberta's been very good to us.
Well, that's good. Yeah. That's good. You mentioned your first job out of your accounting designation in university. Was there a high school job or a summer job that was sort of your first dip into the workforce?
Not a whole lot. Retail, summer jobs in the mall kind of thing. Yeah. Just enough to keep things going while in university. But I would say that, it was really focused on your studies, right? And getting through that program. It was a co-op program too at Memorial, so really gave you an opportunity to get in and get to know the industry prior to graduation. And then you just kind of continued on that very established path. Yeah. It wasn't very creative. It wasn't very, adventurous. It was a sure and steady path, which I think played out well for the way my career has unfolded, because certainly, being with Fortis now will be 30 years next year.
Wow.
Really wrote out all the opportunities that organization has offered me, which have been plentiful. My dad worked for the same company for 38 years.
That's
right? It was kind of that environment where you commit and you stay for the long term, which has been an interesting conversation with, employees these days who come to us and look for varied opportunities. And I really do preach patience sometimes and building that foundation, right? All those experiences, they layer on each other to let you do other things. But I think sometimes these days, which runs counter to my background, there's this variation and looking for something new always.
Yeah.
And I think there's a benefit to that, but there's also a benefit to investing and finding a course longer term.
Yeah, because it is rare these days to know people who've been anywhere almost longer than sort of 5 or 7 years.
I drank the Kool-Aid a very long time ago. My blood runs pretty blue.
Yeah.
Fortis blue.
I mean, Fortis is across the country. So when you were moving from Fortis in Newfoundland to Alberta, was that an intentional choice to go to Alberta, or did you have a few options? And what drew you to Alberta?
Well, Alberta and the assets that they purchased in Alberta and BC were really Fortis's first foray into the West and the first really large acquisition. Fortis has a very unique culture, and it's hard to articulate sometimes. It likely stems a little bit from the model where there is a holding company, but we operate our subsidiaries autonomously in our local jurisdictions. Yeah. And I wonder, too, if it comes from the origin of being in Newfoundland as an island, the way the culture is built around taking care of one another, a deep concern and familiarity that we have in our cultures, in our subsidiaries. So I think when Fortis was coming out west, they were really encouraging of anyone who might come and foster that culture in this new entity, which was really being recreated. And, the focus on people, the focus on regulatory expertise, the desire to really make these assets valuable for customers, the shareholder, the province. I think, having watched Newfoundland Power grow and Fortis gradually expand, it was a good opportunity for me to come and extend it here. And for me personally, it was a really good opportunity because while Newfoundland Power is a great employer, they do pick the best and the brightest, and they do have long careers. So in terms of, the next opportunity for me, I'd like to think I would have been CEO of Newfoundland Power, but, clearly I've been able to achieve that here.
Yeah. You had to settle for second place Alberta.
And learn so much.
Yeah.
Bringing an organization along like that over the last 20 years through all that we've been through, whether it's the economy or changes in government, changes in regulation, changes in customer needs. It's been a really, really interesting time to learn and grow.
Yeah, well, that's a great segue to the notion of everyone's career is a assemblage of moments and people and mentors.
Absolutely.
What are some of the people and experiences that stand out for you that really helped shape your leadership style, your way of operating, or people that you felt really left an imprint on you and your approach?
Yeah. I mean, from a work perspective, early on, there was a deep commitment to coming from a financial background, exposing me to the operational side of the business. So, of course, when you run a utility with all of its infrastructure and all of its engineering requirements, sometimes it's a little unusual to come at it as being a CEO from a financial side. Having said that, we're fully regulated, and the regulated side of the business is important too. So early on, there's people like Gary Smith at Fortis who, took me under his wing and really taught me an appreciation for what it means in the field, how important the work that we do for our customers is, just making sure that we truly appreciated the value of the service that we do each and every day. That was deeply ingrained in me. And I think it's a mantra that I live by now with our employees, with our customers, when I'm talking to government, the regulator, anyone, is just the service that we provide and how important it is. Yeah. I also worked with some of the best regulatory people at Newfoundland Power. Peter Altine was a really great regulatory practitioner who taught a deep respect and discipline around regulation. When I came here, Thierry Dalglish was our external counsel. Again, just a extraordinary expert around regulation and understanding the interconnection between our financials and our rate making and how that translated into what we could do for customers. So, those types of disciplines are what I had the foundation to build on. And I learned a lot about the technical side of the business by being in those hearing rooms or preparing witnesses or, developing rate cases that asked for the things that we needed to do for customers that I could appreciate having been exposed to those types of environments. I mean, I'd also have to say that, John was working with Royal Bank at the time, came out to work for ATB, and we really embraced this move together. And I think that to make a move like that as a family successful, you both had to be really committed. You can't be making a move and looking back and hoping or wishing you were back in the other place.
Yes.
We were both all in, and as a result, we both had a lot of success and built a really great life here. So all those things together, I think, have really provided the background for me to get here.
Yeah, that's wonderful, wonderful. It's always, you're fortunate to have good leaders, good mentors, good experiences that help shape us along the way. It makes us who we are.
Exactly.
Right? And sounds like you had a great raft of good mentors and people who helped you along your way. You recently received the King Charles Coronation Medal for your leadership and support of women. You're on the board of Careers Next Generation. Tell us a bit about involvement in community, what really drives you from a not a work investment standpoint, but a community investment and giving back, et cetera. And why are things like trades important to you, particularly given as an accountant as a background?
I have to say I was quite surprised, but also very honored to get that award. Having, seen myself as moving to the province, to be seen as someone who has contributed to your community and to your province was, wow, that's great recognition. I'm glad to be seen to have an impact. I mean, when it comes to the trades, is what we do. And I do believe that our future success as a province really does rely on, promotion of our trade. I mean, I think our economy, what drives our economy reflects that. I don't know if traditionally we've put as much a focus on trades as we should.
I agree.
And I believe there's a great appreciation, which is important and it needs to be promoted. We've had great success bringing our people in through the apprentice program. We have apprentices who have started that way, but gone into leadership roles and really progressed through our organization. So there's real success stories to share. The history to careers is deep and long, and there's a real passion about it that when you join that board, you start to feel and want to represent and promote. Yeah. It's a very dedicated board, and it's been longstanding, like I say. So really, seeing the benefits that we have from it and realizing that the future probably requires a focus on trade, I really felt that I should commit my own energy to it. And when it comes to women, obviously being a woman in an industry that is essentially technical in nature, and, in the field, you don't see as many women progressing through leadership roles. I don't pound the table with respect to women's issues, but I think we all have to recognize diversity in whatever form it is and make sure that we're offering supports where it should be. I've never felt like I had to prove anything different by being a woman in a role in this organization. But as you would know, when I come to many industry tables, there's not as many of us as you'd like to see, perhaps sometimes.
BCA table,
right?
Exactly, yeah.
So there is a recognition of that and hopefully promoting by example what's possible and showing others that there's a way to be successful in roles like this, in industries like this.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that's happening lately is, technology, AI, whatever, is changing the way we do work. I think we have to open our minds to different ways of doing things. I think the trades are part of that. I think diverse thought is a part of that as well. So, these are causes that I guess are near to me because of my own experiences. And then I look at my boys and what they might do. I hope that they open their minds. They're in university now, but I hope they open their minds to all kinds of opportunities, how they might apply whatever they study, wherever they study.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as a dad of a lad who went through the careers program, thank you for
Right.
your leadership in that. It was a tremendous program for him. He did welding and really was an incredible ability to touch kids at a younger age, leading up to a choice of where they could go career wise. In the high school environment, that I think is so important because they oftentimes kids don't make those choices till later on if they're not exposed to the
Right.
kinds of opportunities that the trades offer.
Right.
And that's such a benefit that careers offers.
Well, and at such a time in their lives, I wonder how these kids are sometimes supposed to know at 17, 18 years old exactly what they want to do.
Yeah.
And to provide them an option or a possible path forward. And you'd be surprised how many people I speak to these days, and we talk about our kids and how many are going down that path.
Yeah.
Which is why I think it really is the future.
I agree.
And there's some really interesting opportunities coming out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the tides are turning with respect to everything from the esteem of the trades not being viewed as highly, that the opportunities being challenging. I think the kids are seeing good incomes, high demand for the roles,
Absolutely.
great pathways of major projects and investments that are happening that they're going to need to be built for years and decades. So there's a tremendous amount of growing and renewed interest in trades occupations.
I think there are trade occupations too where technologies will complement, not replace.
Exactly. Yes.
Which is also very promising, I think, for young people who wonder about what they might invest in and how it might be altered by technology in the future. But there's many trades that will remain for some time.
I agree. They're to some degree AI proof. Like there's a lot of protection in that. So when you're not running FortisAlberta and you're not championing women and you're not running or on the board of Careers Next Generation, what would we find you doing? What are your hobbies and what do you do outside of work that fills your cup?
Right. There's not a whole lot of time outside those things.
Agreed, yeah.
And my two boys are away at school for 8 months of the year. They're hockey players. We spend a lot of time on the road going to watch them play.
Is that right?
We're a big hockey family. We've invested a lot of time. Thankfully, they've managed to extend their career in hockey into their university life.
Great.
So it's really, really fun to get to go and watch them play. One is in New York and one's in BC, so that keeps us pretty busy. I do like to read. I read a fair bit.
Yeah.
And I'm actually a pretty good surfer. I surf off the back of our surf boat during the summer.
Very nice.
It's one of my fun facts. Keeps me young. I try to keep up with the kids, although they're much better than I am.
Well, hey, if you're shredding the waves, that's pretty impressive. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you follow your boys playing hockey. So that must take you all over North America to some degree. Yeah.
One is in New York, Colgate University in New York. One is at UBC, so two opposite ends of the continent. And we've seen a lot of Alberta, a lot of this country. Just getting to go and watch them play. It's a really unique community. When you talk about being involved in things, I have realized that I do enjoy community. I like being part of teams or groups, whether it's boards or the teams at work or whatever. I'm not sure what retirement looks like yet because of that. That staying a part of a team or a group or a regular connection every day. It's interesting when you start to look forward at this point in your career. What does that look like?
Yeah.
And how does it take shape over time?
Yeah. Well, any of the supposed retired people that I know in the BCA network are the last thing they are is retired. They're almost busier than they are now than they were when they were working.
Yeah.
Any good book recommendations that you've seen in the past couple year or so?
One of the ones that I read recently, I am in a book club, and it's called Finding Flora.
Okay.
And it's actually about women, ironically, way back in the day, being early settlers of homesteads in Alberta.
Oh, interesting.
And in our service area, Lacombe, the central Alberta part.
Interesting.
And it talks about, the hardships of going through, the hardships that they came from, and then the hardships that they go through settling, as independent women on this land. And, I thought it was pretty impactful in terms of learning about the history of a province that I've come to live in. And, of course, rallying for the women who were successful and what they went through. And, it was a really, really good read.
That's excellent. Well, I'm sure there's going to be a spike in book sales after the podcast gets released. So, Janine, let's switch gears. We'll talk about Fortis Alberta. So for those listeners who may not be familiar with the company, tell us about it and what it does for Albertans.
I always welcome the opportunity to do that because Fortis Alberta is a distribution facility owner and operator. We don't actually issue bills, so we're not a retailer. So although our customers and our communities see our trucks rolling down the streets and our guys up on poles, they don't often associate what they do with the brand of Fortis Alberta. Mm-hmm. And they're often surprised to know that we operate in 240 communities in Alberta. We have about 605,000 sites, which we like to say equates to touching 2 million souls every day.
Nice. And a site could be everything from a house to a industrial facility.
Yeah, a farm, an irrigation service. Yeah. We have 133,000 kilometers of line, which is actually enough to circle the globe 3 times.
Oh, wow.
And 1.1 million poles. So a lot of infrastructure covering a lot of this beautiful province. So 60% of the distribution network we own and operate. Okay. So it's quite an expansive operation. We do spend a lot of time in our communities. We do employ 1,300 Albertans who live and work in those communities. So about 40 service points, which allows us to be very dispersed but very close to what's going on in the province. So really, really proud of the work that we do outside of Edmonton and Calgary, which of course would be MX and Epcor, and ATCO tends to serve the northern part of the province, and then AltaLink aligns with us as the TFO in our service area. So it's a little unusual compared to other jurisdictions where you might see a single operator, but as an industry, we've done really well at coordinating our activities, and it's very interesting, but very complex service territory right now. Wildfire is top of mind. You and I talked about it with respect to the rain today and yesterday and the weekend. We actually applaud the rain. It's definitely an issue for us, top of mind. I mean, utilities have always managed wildfire risks and mitigated wildfires, but utility infrastructure can ignite wildfires. Yeah. So we're very focused on preventative measures and making sure that we have good practices and procedures in place. And most recently, that has extended into hiring a meteorologist, so doing our own weather forecasting, embracing technologies that allow us to match those forecasts against our infrastructure and tell us where the risks are highest. And we can actually deploy resources ahead of time. Looking at things like public safety power shutoff, so where we actually go in and proactively de-energize to avoid wildfires. So certainly for us, given our service territory and the beautiful areas that we serve, that's a top of mind topic for us these days. So rain is good in our days.
Yes. Just the last thing we wanted is more wildfires here in Alberta. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What about your business would you hope people take away in the sense that they may not know, and we all flick switches, expect the light to go on or the toaster to go on. It's a complex industry. So what are some of the little known things that you hope people begin to understand and appreciate about the industry?
Well, it is interesting because, I when I'm describing Fortis Alberta, I talk in terms of poles and wires. When I first came to Fortis Alberta in Alberta, we were really in a very high growth period. So 2006, 2007, before the financial downturn, it was a very high growth period in the province. And it was really about constructing services, right? Getting new sites interconnected. And that still remains a big part of what we do. I think what has changed most significantly and what people might not appreciate is, first of all, the level of detail that goes into constructing those services and maintaining them on a daily basis. So having a control center, a 24/7 control center in Airdrie, having a care center where people actually call into our local contact agents and get, firsthand advice or counsel or answers. And just the amount of planning that goes into making sure that we are putting the right system in place for our customers. Being fully regulated, and we can talk about that a little bit in terms of what that means, but essentially everything that we do in terms of how we identify needs for services, how we design them, and how we pay for them is, there's a lot of oversight of those activities in order to be sure that we're doing the right things for customers, we need to be very, very thoughtful about everything that we do. So a lot of thought and care and concern goes in to, our basic services for our customers. I think the thing that has evolved likely the most is just how complex the grid has become. So it's not just a series of poles and wires, with a transformer going down to a meter on a house. There's a lot of technology that we've deployed on that grid that allows us to respond to things that have newly interconnected to the grid. So distributed energy resources, rooftop solar, batteries, with the proliferation of those. So we have about 1,400 megawatts of DERs interconnected into our system. And our coincident peak in 2025 was about 2920. So about 1,400 compared to 2920. That's about 50% generation to load. So that's a very new dynamic for our system. When customers introduce things like rooftop solar, that's an example of customers now being prosumers, not just consumers. So we're not talking about one-way power flow anymore. We're talking about two-way power flow, power quality issues. So now we see ourselves just recently receiving a government grant, Government of Alberta and ERA funding for our ADMS. So we're going to aggregate our system and learn how we can leverage all that's available within it to meet some of these new emerging needs in different ways. It's a switch, but there's a lot of infrastructure tied to that switch, a lot of people thinking a lot about that infrastructure, but then also learning how the grid can be leveraged to provide those services in different ways using technology and different engineering approaches. So it's not as simple as it sounds. I think these days, because when we talk about energy, you and I have talked about this before, when I get invited to energy conferences in this province, it's usually about oil and gas.
Exactly.
Which makes sense. I have a deep respect for that. It's an anchor of our economy. But I think these days, more and more, both at the provincial level and the federal level, we're seeing that electricity is where that energy ultimately gets delivered to customers that can use it, and new opportunities for our economy and things like that. So, how well positioned we are to support those things as a utility industry is something that I'm kind of very excited about promoting and educating more and more. I'm always inviting people to come, tour our control center and see what we're doing and the technologies that we've adopted so that they can see that this is a very robust, complex grid, not just a series of poles and wires.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, in a little bit, we'll sort of touch on some of the evolution in this electrification of the world, et cetera. But where does Alberta's power sector sit? They're going through a review and still ongoing. Where do you see the Alberta power sector ending up in the next year or two? And what are some of the things you're grappling with at FortisAlberta to be able to help support the growth of demand in Alberta over time?
Yeah. We're at a very interesting crossroads where we came from a period of very high growth. So we had a lot of investment in this province. We had unconstrained transmission policy for a period of time, and we invested a lot, came to a point where we started to reflect on what we had invested and what the costs were for customers, ratepayers, taxpayers, and that was appropriate. While that was happening, we went through a pandemic and our entire worlds got unturned.
Yeah.
And we went through a double black swan with the economy, our oil and gas economy. So now I feel like we've recovered from those things. And there's certainly, I see a resurgence of activity in this province. Really, really exciting growth opportunities. The question now is, how do we leverage all that was previously invested so that we optimize that and we don't add costs unnecessarily? And then how do we add capacity to facilitate that growth without adding a lot of burden to ratepayers, taxpayers, once again? And I think that's where it's incumbent on us as industry to really be a trusted advisor to show what those next investments can be, how prudently they can be done to unlock that potential and open up the opportunities for growth without creating a burdensome environment for ratepayers.
Yeah.
And so, when I talk to my board and talk about our strategy, we realize that it's incumbent upon us to extract every bit of value there is in the existing infrastructure before we add more.
Yeah.
That's the type of thing where we say, look, we can do these things. We do have to invest a little, but we avoid a lot by doing that. I think the other thing that is promising right now is that it's not build it and they will come. They're actually here. So, in 2023, we had about 1,000 megawatts of new requests for industrial and commercial load, traditional large loads.
Yeah.
That number doubled in 2025 to 2,000 megawatts. At the distribution level, that's a lot. And so, when we work very collaboratively with the ISO and with AltaLink, and we do long-term resource plans, and utility infrastructure takes a long time to build.
Yep.
And when we look at the horizon to build them, there are some very imminent needs on our capacity that weren't really contemplated in those long-term resource plans. So how do we embrace it quickly and be agile, which I think is another word I use a lot with my board, is being agile, while also making sure that we have, longer-term sustainable approaches to continuing to embrace growth.
Yeah.
So what's that immediate response and what's a longer-term solution?
Yeah. It must be challenging to have sort of surges of unexpected demand, like data centers is a perfect example, that sort of come in relatively quickly against the backdrop, as you say, of long lead time, infrastructure approval, planning approvals, and build. Does it create challenges in being able to properly forecast, particularly with growth and electrification of the economy? And does Alberta, given its unique model versus the crown corporations that we see around the rest of the country, largely of having sort of swings in prices and therefore attractiveness? That's kind of a convoluted question, but how can we maybe look longer term so that we can be competitive, have enough power, have enough capacity, and still be affordable?
The connection between generation, transmission, and distribution, really touches all the things that you talked about, because clearly the reviews that we've done as a province to look at our energy-only market and the rules that govern that have had impacts on the generators who've shared in consultation with the ISO and with policymakers around what that should look like and how we can improve things so that we don't have a lot of volatility in commodity prices, but we do provide some reassurances to those that invest in those generation projects too. Very, very delicate balance there, right? For us in terms of being responsive, we do operate in 8 of Alberta's fastest growing communities. Yeah. So, Alberta has a long track record of growth and not just localized in one particular place. Like we tend to do it quite nicely across the province. So the challenge for us, or maybe the opportunity, is actually staying close to those municipalities and those customers all the time. So we really have to be very deliberate about understanding what their short-term and long-term plans are. So the sooner that customers come to us and share with us what their plans are, the more we can shape what their service might look like. So one of the other things that we've done recently is developed a hosting capacity map. So we actually know in our system where there is, I won't say excess, but existing capacity. So if a customer comes to us and says, we want to construct a facility to do X, Y, and Z, we're going to need X number of megawatts, this is our lead time, we can actually say, have you thought about this location? And we can make your interconnection a little easier. So some of this is unexpected, and it's nicely unexpected, in terms of a growth opportunity that we're seeing come to us. Some of it, we need to be really close to our customers to kind of shape it and make sure that the expectations are understood as they go through the experience. But some of this is, also teaching us as an industry how we need to be agile and we need to be able to embrace. So this is where, having really strong policy that is responsive, getting out of our own way and making sure that we're setting ourselves up for these things can really help. And I think that's when industry speaks to people like you or government or our regulators. It really is about agility, responsiveness, pace, and making sure that we're putting the right frameworks in place that give us some latitude. I think, for us as an industry, the bookend of affordability right now is creating the conservatism, right? How do we do those things, provide that latitude without losing sight of what the cost might be ultimately at the end of the day?
Yeah. Yeah. You touched earlier on being a regulated entity. So maybe for those that may not be familiar, how does that change the way in which decisions are made, or the operating structure of a company, in the sense that, you can't just set prices to generate a return that you think you want to achieve? It's all very sort of controlled and overseen. So maybe tell us about how does that make you unique compared to any other business that isn't regulated?
So Fortis Alberta is a fully regulated investor-owned utility. So Fortis is our single shareholder, but Fortis has many shareholders as the public-facing entity. So Fortis does provide equity into Fortis Alberta, and we are financed as well with debt. But as a regulated utility, we are a monopoly that provides an essential service in a designated service area in the province. And the AUC, the Alberta Utilities Commission, designates that service area for us and oversees the terms and conditions over which we provide that service to our customers. Yeah. And that is the way we engage with customers, reliability standards, and also the price of the service that we provide. The counter to that is, as a utility absorbing that obligation to serve, we are entitled to a return on and of the investments that we make to provide that service. That's the regulatory compact. That regulatory compact provides investors the assurance that they need to continue to invest and provide the equity that we then contribute to the infrastructure. Debt providers are reassured by the fact that we have that regulatory compact that keeps our cost of debt relatively low. All of that comes together to allow us to invest under these terms and conditions of service to provide our service to our customers. What that means is, on a regular cadence, then, we go in to the regulator with customers and we say, these are our plans. We see this type of load growth. We see this type of asset maintenance required. We see these types of new technologies, automated meters, for example, to be deployed. Yep. These are the plans that we have, and customers ask us a lot of questions. The regulator tests the assumptions, and we establish what's called a revenue requirement, or a rate base with a revenue requirement, and that translates into our rates. Yep. And then on a regular basis, we have to report as to how we've performed relative to that. There's, checks and balances on a regular basis to make sure that we're adhering to our terms and conditions of service, and that our rates are staying within that approved formula that the Commission has outlined for us.
Right. Yeah. So I guess there's pluses and minuses of the model, right? There's almost not a guaranteed, but a fairly assured level of income and return, which creates some investor attractiveness. But then there's also, you're capped on your upside, right? So there's pluses and minuses too.
There is. I'm a long student of the regulatory compact. I've experienced under cost of service regulation, as well as under our performance-based regulation that we currently have, which is more formula-driven. I do see the benefit of the incentives that rate regulation provides to utilities to optimize and be efficient, and the assurance that provides our customers. It is difficult in environments like we're currently experiencing, where that rate making isn't flexible to support maybe emerging needs that we see in front of us. So that's the dynamic that we're managing right now, is how do we leverage our tariff to do the right things for our customers, but also grow within the constraint of what you've been provided with.
Yeah. Janine, let's zoom out to higher level, kind of broad electrification, et cetera. Maybe paint the picture for the listeners, like what is going on with respect to electricity and electrification writ large. And we've touched on a few things. We've talked about data centers and prosumers, you called them. So not only consuming, but generating power at a local level with rooftop solar, et cetera. Like what's the trajectory of electricity and electrification in our individual and industrial lives that you're seeing and having to factor into what Fortis Alberta is doing, kind of at a macro level?
The focus on electrification kind of ebbs and flows, right? There for a while, we were seeing, particularly when coming out of the pandemic, and we saw a big focus on ESG and sustainability and, some of the politics at play at the time. You know, depending on what the focus is, you definitely see more of a priority being put on electrification.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really what our customers want from us, right? So depending on what customers are feeling passionate about at the time really drives the amount of electrification that we see. And you see that in the EV, electric vehicle market, where you see ebbs and flows. Sometimes it's higher than others. So we have seen, you know, therefore, while we're seeing a strong focus on electrification, I still believe we see a consistent amount of electrification. Right now, for me, the focus is more on load growth. So it's not so much a drain on the system for electrification, although there is some element of that. It's more about providing the capacity for load growth. I think that's where the current dynamic is mostly, as we try to balance our political priorities between growth and becoming a sustainable economy and an economic superpower of our own and our own sovereignty. I think we're trying to balance that with our focus on the environment and electrification and those goals. So there's a little bit of an ebb and flow going right now. I don't think we want to walk away entirely from our focus on electrification and clean energy. I think in our province, we've demonstrated that you can do both. You can have energy sources that are very, very clean. So I think we're, I guess, real time actually negotiating that, while at the same time also having to be responsive to these opportunities for load growth requires us to put infrastructure in place to get things done, while not driven by electrification, but driven more by economic growth and load.
Yeah. Because there just seems to be so much that's being layered into electrification, whether it is EVs and mobility, whether it's heat pumps in replacing our furnaces and our air conditioners. You layer then on just economic growth and industrial growth in the province. You then layer in the desire to attract data centers.
Exactly.
Like, how do we manage all of that? And are some of those shifts or moves just too ambitious for the practicalities of building out the generation and distribution systems? Or, you know, because one of the things we're seeing in the United States is sort of there was a come one, come all on the data center side, and now there's a massive amount of pushback, largely from what I can see, of increasing prices or instability in the grid. How do we balance all of those interests and demands on electrification while, you know, keeping it affordable, making sure we still have lights when we flick the switch, and et cetera? It kind of gets back to that earlier question about planning amongst all that complexity. Can we have our cake and eat it too, right? You know?
I think the one thing we have on our side is that in this province, we are really good energy providers, like either generators, transmitters, or distributors. Like, we are very good at what we do. And I think the key is making sure we understand what it is we want. And it's difficult sometimes for us because we feel a little bit in the middle, because our customers come to us and tell us directly what they want. We want to be positioned to give it to them. And then the other side of that coin is whether it aligns with what our provincial goals are. And so data centers are a perfect example of where we have been very clear that we would like to see data centers come to our province. There is that dynamic then of whether we want the hyperscalers to come and maybe use the capacity that exists in that very targeted way for those large hyperscalers. But the traditional data centers, the smaller data centers, are the ones that are coming to us directly as customers with opportunities in the communities that we serve, bringing very innovative technologies and very good opportunities for the communities themselves. And we never want to be the ones to say we can't support or provide the service that you need, because there are conflicting needs for either the community or for the commercial and industrial loads that are bringing jobs to the province at the same time as these data center requests are coming in. So it is a very interesting time where I think we are seeing firsthand customers coming to us and asking for things, but as a province, as a policy, as a rate-making philosophy, where are we directing our energies and how do we prioritize when all of this is coming at us so quickly, how we allocate the capacity that's available to the needs that are coming to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the dynamic that we're experiencing right now. Because being fully regulated, traditionally, a customer comes to us, we see the request, we interconnect, the next customer comes in, and it's just, a kind of a free-flowing process where the capacity is allocated as the customers come to us. Now we have many customers coming to us with many different complex needs with limited capacity. And so we want to meet all of those needs, and we want to be able to promote the fact that we've done that and that we've advanced these causes, but sometimes they run counter to each other.
Yeah.
And that's where we need the direction and the alignment.
Yeah. And are there places around the world or North America that you've seen that have done this well? They've taken all of the pressures and come out with a nice sort of Goldilocks outcome of, satisfied the demand and the customers and the growth potential and the affordability? And are there places that we don't want to follow the path? Who's done it well? Who's done it?
I don't think there's any magic formula to it. I mean, data centers in and of themselves are very complex. They're very unusual compared to traditional loads. They amp up very quickly and they have very dynamic loads. They have a lot of urgency around their requests. They require a lot of capacity.
Yeah.
In and of themselves, they create issues in terms of the terms in which we connect them, right? Should there be financial commitments, exit clauses, term requirements, so that when we bring them on and we invest in them, that we have a long-term relationship with them. They are in and of themselves creating issues as an industry that you'll see talked about across North America in terms of wanting to attract them, but under the right terms so that there's proper cost responsibility and that we don't see costs being passed along to others. When you have that dynamic layered in with this wonderful story of, industrial and commercial load growth in many places of the province, that's the challenge, is to manage both of those things simultaneously and hopefully see success in both.
Yeah. As Alberta continues its market restructuring and what have you, what are you hoping from a FortisAlberta perspective the end outcome will be? What are some of the reforms or shifts that you hope will come that haven't quite yet come?
I mean, ultimately, any of these things that happen in our province affect our customers because we're the last mile to the customer. So whatever impacts the customer or their business affects us. So, getting some of the things, for example, with REM settled and moving forward and having those things applied will provide some certainty to those customers, and it just kind of settles the conversation. I think, as we navigate these things, we have a new minister now, which will provide an opportunity to have a conversation about these things and set some paths forward as a province. So looking for, what his mandate might be and how we can support that, and getting maybe a little bit more clarity about how we address some of these issues that I've talked about, both in terms of policy as well as rate making. So for me, being a fully regulated utility, it's often very, very helpful when I go to government and we talk about what's in the best interest of Albertans and what protects them. Once we kind of settle on that and we develop policy around it, I can leverage that with the regulator to say, this is in the public interest.
Yes.
And as a adjudicator, that's very powerful for the regulator to be able to turn and say, this is what Albertans are asking for. We're all aligned that it protects them and it's in their best interest, and we should proceed down this path with this approach.
Right.
And that to me is the trifecta, between, actually, it's, I guess, four of us: the customer, the utility, the government, and the regulator coming together and aligning. And that's what I think would be most settling for me, is if we had that alignment. Yeah. And if you have that alignment, then you can sometimes determine the reference points about how to be agile around it. And that's what we need is, okay, we know generally this is where we want to go. We do need some flexibility, though, about how to get there.
Yeah. Tell us what success looks like, but create the flexibility for us to deploy approaches and technologies. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's a pretty common refrain, I think,
Yes.
is from industry often, regardless of the sector, but
Right.
is, don't dictate the path. Let us be creative and let the private sector do what it does best. Exactly. Yeah.
And so what we're doing these days, for example, about being creative is doing pilots. So because of the way where our rate making works, we might not be funded, but we can on a small scale demonstrate the potential for something.
Oh, interesting.
And then bring that forward. So it can be very powerful when I'm talking to government or the regulator about the potential use of virtual power plants. And the fact that we've run a pilot, we understand how it can work, and then we can bring it forward in a greater scale. We've taken the responsibility, right, to demonstrate that, and now we know how we can take those benefits to customers. So, it's incumbent on us to understand what that creativity looks like and to stand behind it too. And then when we talk about flexibility, it's not, an unfettered flexibility. We take the obligation to serve pretty seriously.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Janine, as we close, we like to end on a note of optimism. What are you optimistic about for Alberta, or what makes you optimistic about Alberta's future?
You know what? I'm really excited these days. The customers that are coming to us with the opportunities that they have makes me very excited about the future of this province. And I'm excited about the ways that we can respond to those opportunities. I'm excited about the potential for the grid to support them. And I'm excited about the opportunities that I'm getting more and more like this to share the role that the grid can play in Alberta's future. And I think, more and more we're seeing energy in Alberta go beyond oil and gas into electricity.
Yes.
And for me, that's really, really exciting. I think the future is bright. For us to be operating in 8 of Alberta's fastest growing communities, it's a very exciting signal.
Yeah. Well, I agree that there's so much runway ahead of this province, and we're the driving engine of the country.
Yes.
And so
some of these municipalities that we work with, Adam, they have very sophisticated and aggressive mandates. It's very interesting when I meet with these local councils and mayors and the aspirations that they have for their communities. And I believe that those local mandates are the feeder system for provincial and national growth.
Well, everything starts at the local level, right? And so, thank you for powering people's lives and the work you do at FortisAlberta and joining us on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You've been listening to C-Suite Unplugged. As always, it's a privilege to spend some time with the leading executives of our membership. Thank you to our guests this month for sharing their journey and insights. If you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to review and share the podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time with more unfiltered leadership stories from the C-Suite.